cold, foggy midnight. The train entered a fenced area lined with barbed wire. A man wearing a white coat, boots, and gloves was waiting for those who stepped off the train. He looked at them one by one. You, right. You, left. Each gesture decided the fate of a life. Those sent to the right would be forced to work. Those sent to the left might not see the morning. Thousands of people were being divided by the decision of a single man. The prisoners called him the Angel of Death. His name was Josef Mengele. The birth of a camp. The place where that train arrived was in southern Poland, in the middle of a desolate area surrounded by railway lines and dense forests. A small town, Auschwitz. In May 1940, by direct order of Heinrich Himmler, a camp was established there. The initial plan was simple: to imprison Polish dissidents, intellectuals, resistance members, and political prisoners. The first prisoners arrived on May 20th, 1940. At first, German criminals, then Poles. But the Nazi system never stayed small. Racist ideology quickly transformed this place into something much larger. From 1941 onward, the camp began to expand. By 1942, it was no longer a single camp, it had become a camp complex. 3 main sections and more than 40 subcamps. An area the size of a small town, capable of holding tens of thousands of people at the same time. Each section had a different function. The first section was the administrative center, brick buildings, cell blocks, and disciplinary areas. Prisoners were numbered here. Their identities were erased. A slogan hung at the gate: Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. But there was no freedom here, only a carefully maintained lie. The second section was the largest. Railway tracks ran directly into it. This was where selections were made, decisions were taken, and the system reached a point where thousands of people lost their lives. The third section was established for slave labor, factories, mines, and industrial facilities. Prisoners were forced to work here. Hunger and exhaustion were part of the job. The function of the camp changed over time. First, it was a prison. Then, it became a source of slave labor. And finally, it turned into a planned system of extermination. Daily life followed a routine. But this was not an ordinary routine. Roll call in the early morning hours. Standing for hours. In cold, in heat, with illness. Food was not even enough to survive on. Working hours were long. Security was tight. Barbed wire, guard towers, armed sentries. Escape was nearly impossible. And every day, new trains arrived, new people, new selections. Within this system, some names began to stand out. Doctors wearing white coats, making selections, taking notes. And within this darkness, people like Josef Mengele would make horrific decisions in the name of science. This place entered history under the name Auschwitz. Josef Mengele, born in the quiet Bavarian town of Günzburg, the third child of a wealthy family. His father, Karl Mengele, owned a large factory producing agricultural machinery. He was disciplined, authoritarian, and focused on success. His mother, Walburga, was deeply religious and enforced a strict household. Josef stood out academically from an early age. He chose medicine. He studied at the universities of Munich and Frankfurt. He earned doctorates in anthropology and genetics. Racial science and eugenics began to occupy a central place in his academic world. Germany in the 1930s was shaped by these ideas. Nazi ideology was rising, and the concept of a superior race had become state policy. Mengele did not remain outside this world. In 1937, he joined the Nazi Party. In 1938, he entered the SS. During the war, he served on the Eastern Front and was wounded. For his service, he was awarded the Iron Cross. But the real turning point came in 1943. In May, at the age of 32, he was assigned to Auschwitz-Birkenau with the rank of captain. His official position was deputy chief physician, but he did not think of himself as going there as a doctor. He saw himself as a researcher. His task was clear: to select prisoners from the arriving trains. Those deemed fit for work were sent one way, the rest were directed down another path. And those he deemed suitable for scientific research, especially twin children and people with physical differences, were separated. When he stood on the ramp in his white coat, no one fully understood what it meant. The nickname Angel of Death had not yet emerged, but very soon it would become inseparable from his name. The Angel of Death. When the train stopped, it did not matter whether it was night or day. The air was sometimes freezing, sometimes unbearably hot. The wagon doors opened. People stepped out after days of travel, hungry, exhausted, terrified. Women tried not to let go of their children. The elderly struggled to stay on their feet in the crowd. Luggage was dropped on the ground. Names were shouted. Families were torn apart within minutes. Someone stood in the middle of the ramp, in a white coat, boots, and gloves, with a calm expression on his face. The prisoners whispered a name for him: the Angel of Death. Because he was the one who decided. He raised his finger. You, right. You, left. Those sent to the right were those who looked capable of working. Factories, construction, heavy labor. Those sent to the left were directed toward a process with no return. But he singled out some people in particular: twin children, those with physical differences, dwarfs, people with unusual features. To him, they were scientifically interesting. He would call them over, take notes. At first, they were treated differently from the others, but this difference was not salvation. It was only the beginning of another fate. On the ramp, with a single hand movement, the direction of thousands of lives changed. And Josef Mengele stood at the very center of this power. And the special people he selected would face the most horrifying fate of all. The experiments. Twins were not ordinary prisoners in Josef Mengele's eyes. They were his obsession. Two bodies genetically closest to each other. The same beginning, different interventions. For Mengele, this was the cleanest comparison possible on humans. That is why he stopped when he saw twins on the ramp. He lowered his finger and separated them from the crowd. They were torn from their families and taken to special barracks. In the first stage, they were treated differently: better food, cleaner beds, sometimes toys, sometimes small privileges. But this was not mercy. It was preparation before experimentation. Twins were his natural experimental group. What was applied to one was observed in the other as a control. Pain, illness, reaction time, physical changes, everything was recorded comparatively. Mengele's work was not random. It was multi-layered and systematic. Each experiment served a specific purpose. High-altitude pressure experiments. To simulate the conditions Luftwaffe pilots might face at high altitudes, prisoners were placed in sealed pressure chambers. Loss of consciousness and physical reactions were recorded. After the experiment, results were reported, and the subjects were often classified as no longer usable. Cold resistance, freezing experiments, intended to measure soldier endurance for the Eastern Front and northern regions. Prisoners were exposed to extreme cold, while body temperature, pulse, and behavioral changes were noted. The goal was not survival, but identifying the breaking point. Sterilization and radiation experiments. With the idea of preventing the reproduction of undesirable populations, X-rays and chemical methods were used. these experiments combined mass extermination with biological control. Infection experiments. Diseases such as typhus and malaria were deliberately introduced, and immune responses were observed. Treatment was often not provided, only observation. Studies on dwarfs and eye color. Dwarfs and children with different eye colors were classified as examples of racial deviation. Records were kept on eye color change, blood structure, and heredity. These studies were not scientific, they were ideological. The common point of all these experiments was this: the goal was not treatment. The goal was not even knowledge. The goal was to strengthen the Nazi military and systematically eliminate undesirable people: twins, dwarfs, women, the elderly, and children. Within this system, they were not individuals, they were data points. Mengele behaved like a doctor, but he was not a doctor. He was an unchecked researcher with no ethical boundaries. The so-called laboratory established at Auschwitz remains one of the darkest examples in history of how quickly humanity can be destroyed when science is surrendered to ideology. Collapse. By 1944, the balance of the war began to shift. The Red Army was advancing relentlessly from the east. In the west, the Allies were approaching the heart of Germany. The camp was still operating. Trains continued to arrive, and the extermination process went on. But it was no longer as orderly as before. Panic spread. Documents were burned, records destroyed. SS officers were reassigned to other fronts, and some quietly prepared to disappear. Even as it collapsed, the system tried to erase its traces, because defeat was approaching, and the fear of accountability was growing. Josef Mengele was right in the middle of this unraveling. In January 1945, when the Red Army reached the gates, he emptied his laboratory. He gathered his experiment notes and samples. What he could destroy, he burned. Then he left the camp with other SS officers. His destination was Gross Rosen. In early 1945, he removed his uniform. Using false identities, he posed as an ordinary Wehrmacht soldier. He was captured by American forces. He was interrogated several times, but no one realized who he was. His identity was not detected. When the war ended, Josef Mengele was still free. The years that followed were less a chase and more a void. Through Italy, with the help of former Nazi escape networks, he left Europe. He used new names. He obtained new identities. And he disappeared. Josef Mengele slipped out of a system that had destroyed countless lives without ever being punished. Justice never began for him. A closed camp, an unfinished account. The gates of Auschwitz were closed. When the war ended, the camp stood destroyed and silent. Approximately 1.1 million people lost their lives there. About 200,000 survived. Survivors were taken out of the camp. They went through medical treatment and rehabilitation. Some returned to their home countries. Others were forced to build entirely new lives. But the trauma followed them for a long time. The silence of the camp did not silence the memory of its victims. The stories of twins, women, the elderly, and children still echo. Josef Mengele remained unpunished. Years later, in 1979, while living under a false identity by the sea in Brazil, he died of a heart attack. Even after his death, his real name did not appear on his gravestone. In 1985, his grave was exhumed. Witness statements and forensic examinations, followed by DNA analysis, conclusively confirmed that the body was indeed Josef Mengele. Justice never saw him in a courtroom, but the voices and memories of his victims never fell silent. Some other doctors and perpetrators were tried, some received sentences. Those railway tracks were not just a transportation route, they became a symbol of humanity's darkest choices. and what remains is a lesson etched into both history and science. Conscience and responsibility can never be erased.